Last year saw the release of The Smashing Machine starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as well as Marty Supreme with Timothee Chalamet. Both films were looking at the award season and hoping for their own successes, mainly the acting categories, chiefly for The Rock and Timothee Chalamet for Best Actor in their starring roles as a UFC fighter in the case of The Rock in The Smashing Machine, and for Chalamet as Marty Mauser based on Marty Reisman, a table tennis player who is destined for greatness and his trials and tribulations of achieving that along the way. However, in the film enthusiast space, one question that clouded these films was why the directors of these films had split from previously working together. The directors in question were the Safdie brothers. On Marty Supreme, Josh Safdie was the director and writer. The Smashing Machine, the director was Benny Safdie, who is also a well-known supporting actor. He is going to be appearing in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey as Agamemnon, the king and lord who is heading up the Trojan War. However, the main thing that the Safdies are known for is their directorial outings together as a duo. The films that they are most well known for is Uncut Gems starring Adam Sandler and Good Time starring Robert Pattinson. However, over the past few years there has been growing suspicion that there was a feud between the brothers and that something had happened to cause a rift between them. There was a lot of speculation that something had happened on the set of Good Time, their last film together in 2017, that had potentially caused a rift between them. And more recently there has been reports adding fuel to this fire that Josh Safdie, the director of Marty Supreme, had allowed a underage girl to be exposed to a nude man who was also an ex-con who attempted to put himself on her and had allowed this to continue without any regard for the girl's safety and allowing the cameras to keep rolling and not putting the girl first in this scenario. And whilst this isn't in the final film, reports suggest that Benny Safdie did not know the extent of this issue until 2023, over a decade after this film was released. This report is incredibly troubling. What has gone on this set? At the heart of it, what is the main thing that we should be focusing on in this scenario? And ultimately, the timing of this report seems incredibly suspicious. The Oscar nominations were released just on Friday, but why? Why is this suspicious? Because in old school Hollywood, particularly the Harvey Weinstein era of the 1990s and 2000s, Oscar smear campaigns were the main tactic used by industry veterans, by studios, and chiefly by Weinstein himself in order to paint your enemies as gross, as disgusting, as morally inept, as wrong in every sense that you can come up with, in an effort to give yourself one over them and therefore to have the Academy favour you because the other person on the other side of the aisle is so morally reprehensible. How could you ever possibly vote for them? The tactics of these smear campaigns were things such as saying that A Beautiful Mind, the film starring Russell Crowe, was based on a mathematician who was an anti-Semite, who apparently was homosexual, and the film had gone to great lengths to apparently hide this. To combat the Hurt Locker, the press brought in veterans to attack the realism of the film and argue that in fact the film was not as realistic as it was portrayed to be by the director and its producers. So when insiders argue that with Marty Supreme we are revisiting an old school tactic of a smear campaign, this is not something that we have not seen before. This is something that was well trodden, that we have seen through Hollywood before, and that is not new, and suggests in some sense that we are returning to an old school tactic that Hollywood is well versed in. Recently, over the past few years, Hollywood has become more engrossed in social media Oscar campaigns. For example, last year The Brutalist failed out because its editor had said that they had used an AI tool as part of an effort to make sure that the Hungarian dialects were as realistic as possible. Emilia Perez was lambasted and sidelined as a result of Carla Sofia Gascon's old tweets resurfacing. So this year, the campaign that seemingly is being headed against Marty Supreme suggests a return to old school tactics. The more important question that remains is, what did Josh Safdie know? And I don't know if I have the answer to that. because ultimately, I don't know if we have all the information about this, and insiders close to the Safdie brothers have suggested as much by arguing that their relationship is actually far more complex and nuanced. That reports saying they have split over this issue have attempted to portray it as. So, what are we missing? I don't know. And ultimately, I don't think we'll ever know. I think that this is probably going to get pushed aside. I don't think anyone is going to address this. And ultimately, I think that this comes down to a matter of what do we care about and what are we willing to push aside if we don't have the facts of it. And ultimately for me, there doesn't seem to be enough here to go on to really form a strong opinion of this. And in some sense, that is kind of worrying, I suppose, that we're never going to get a definitive answer as to whether or not what is being alleged actually occurred. And ultimately, there is no strong evidence either way, and that may just be enough for a lot of Academy voters to just say, Timothee Chalamet, he's going to get an Oscar eventually. Let's just not give it for this one, whilst we don't know what exactly has gone on behind the scenes with Josh Safdie, especially since this film itself has also had other reports that have alleged that the Marty Reisman family have complained and have maligned this film by saying that the film is an inaccurate representation of the real Marty Reisman's life, and that ultimately the film takes a lot of facts from his life and then portrays a lot of it as fiction and takes advantage of his legacy as one of the best ping pong players ever, and does not portray him as a good man. It does not portray him accurately. However, what I would say, a film does not ultimately purport to be a biopic. It does not claim to be based on the autobiography of Marty Reisman. It pays homage to him, it has a lot of nods to him, but ultimately the film is about a man called Marty Mauser, not Marty Reisman. The idea that this is disrespectful to him is one that I think goes a step too far. Maybe there could be more acknowledgement of the autobiography, and there could be more acknowledgement that this is a blending of fiction and non-fiction, but the idea that this is disrespectful is a step too far for me. But both of these instances suggest a smear campaign against Marty Supreme. That, to me, suggests that someone in the industry thinks of it as enough of a threat to have to take it down. And I just wonder about who that is. Who is the big competitor in this field that wants to take Marty Supreme down? It is fascinating that we're returning to this old school Hollywood system that is attempting to malign one another in the press. I think that this makes this year's Oscars more interesting in a race that you could probably argue has been done or has looked finished for a long time this year.